Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Horn. I am the Diversity Services Coordinator at the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health. One moment. There we go. Forgive me. A little bit of a technical difficulty, but again, my name is Dennis Horn. I am the Diversity Services Coordinator at the Department of Behavioral Health here in Fresno County. And for Black History Month, we have had a series of live stream events featuring leaders from the Black community all over Fresno County. Today's discussion is mental wellness and the Black church, or the Black church and mental wellness, whatever order you prefer. But we have three special guests with us today who have experience and or occupations in mental health and in the faith community. So without further ado, I will have them introduce themselves and we'll get into this conversation. I know it's going to be dynamic and robust. If the gentlemen don't mind, I will start with Mrs. Kreiner here, and then on to Pastor McAlister, and finally, Dr. Morgan.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for tuning in. And Dennis, thank you for even just considering me to be part of this discussion. I'm really excited about it. I am Jessica Kreiner. I am an associate marriage and family therapist, and I currently work for Onsite Counseling Center through FPU. And I am a proud member of St. Rest Baptist Church. And we do a lot of community work. So this discussion is so exciting for me. Yeah, it's time for it. So I am glad to be here. So I've done a lot of work through the Well Community Church, as well as working I was a social worker for a foster care and adoption social worker for 8 years as well. So I have a lot of experience working in the mental health realm.
Pastor McAlister.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. And I appreciate Jessica's comments about what she's doing and what she's into, because some of those things are very close to my heart. I am the pastor of Saints Community Church here in Fresno, and been the leader of that congregation. Thank you for 27 years. But along with that, when I first started my career in mental health, and I had my first stint of work. I did this there with Fresno County Mental Health Department, and worked there for, I guess, about 10 years or so. And then later I heard about an opportunity to work at the University at Fresno State in the Student Health and Counseling Center. And sometimes we've called it psychological services, one thing or another. But the intent is to provide those kinds of counseling services to students on campus and be available to consult with faculty and so forth. And currently at this stage of the game, I work just part-time, a couple of days a week, and the other days I spend attending to the business of the church and dealing with people at that level. So it's sort of a interesting mixture of those things, but I found out that I've been able to blend them together quite well. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor McAlister. Thank you, Jessica. Dr. Morgan.
Yes, Reverend Dr. Samuel Morgan, and I am the assistant pastor at Westside Church of God under Dr. Paul L. Binion. And it is a pleasure and an honor to be here. I feel like you had to go way down the list to find me.
Not at all, not at all.
And such distinguished company. In my career, of course, I've had training, a BA in psychology, a master's degree in counseling psychology. I completed my hours for my MFT, and I'm currently in the testing phase. But in addition to that, I received a doctorate in Christian counseling. And so that allows me to do the pastoral and congregational care counseling that I provide at our local congregation. And I'm also the director of the Westside Counseling Center, which is housed on our site at Westside Church of God. So it is definitely an honor to be here. I've provided premarital and counseling services for our laity for about 23 years, 22 to 23 years. So as Pastor Binion has given me or entrusted me with that ability and with that responsibility. And we don't just serve the people at our church, but we've also served those in the community as well. So to be able to talk on this subject and give any insights that I may have, and in addition to that of Pastor McAlister and First Lady Kreiner is a great opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. I find it interesting that he said I had to go way down on the list, and then you give me a lot of accomplishments and accolades here. So I know we have the right panelists here today. So I thank you all three for joining us. Let's just jump into it. I want to know a little bit about your genesis in this work, right? So as a minister, as a first lady, how and why did you pursue a career in the mental health space? Whoever wants to start, please feel free.
Okay. You want to go first, Jessica?
Sure, I can. So my journey in mental health started way back in college I didn't really know that this was the route that I was going to go. I think I was definitely God ordained. But, after you get out of college, you go where the jobs are. And so that's how I became a social worker. And so I loved that job. But I was also finding that there was, that it was hard for me to be able to know the stories in depth of the people that I work with. And so that was one of the things that brought me back into this idea of getting back into therapy. And so that was one of the things that brought me, I've kind of had several opportunities to be part of the mental health realm. And so that kind of just evolved as time went on. And this is kind of how I've landed into back into the therapy world. And so that's why I wanted to get into this work, to hear the stories of the people in depth.
Jessica talks about hearing the stories of the people in depth and how that Dennis impacted her. And my story, I think, is somewhat similar to that. You asked how did I sort of end up where I am. Well, it really goes back, my experience to the Black church, and the fact that I grew up in a neighborhood. I grew up just north of here in the community of Madera, and grew up in a neighborhood that was sort of a poverty-stricken. And periodically there was an elderly gentleman there in the congregation, and sometime we would visit him. And our church, unfortunately, Morgan only had 2 restrooms, one for the lady and one for the guys. And sometimes the guys was crowded, so we would run across the street as kids, the teenagers, to this gentleman's house. I lived directly across the street, and of course he had what we called a outhouse. And it was wooden and had an old Sears and Roebuck catalog hanging on a wire. And I remember him saying to me one day, he says, son, the older folk always, identified with your family. He says, son, our people need help. And we want you to get your schooling and to help our people. And little did he realize that he was planting some seeds inside of me that would later mature. So when I already knew in high school that I wanted to become a social worker, I knew that very clearly. I didn't know, and I thought I would become a traditional social worker in the welfare system, was what I thought. But as I pursued my graduate level of work, and I started being placed, I was placed in a community organization model there that they called model cities back in the day. And then later I had my internship at Fresno County Mental Health. And I said, okay, this mental health stuff feels pretty good. I kind of like it. It's talking, it's sort of helping with people. So I decided to go into that arena. And while I was going towards that arena, I felt this call, this internal call, to begin to do the ministry thing in the church. And so I found myself sort of blending those things together. And it's been a good blend because I find out that whether people are in the church or out of the church, there's a lot of hurt and pain, there's a lot of trauma, and so forth. And so it's allowed me an opportunity and that wherever I am at whatever time, I can sort of try to be a help.
Wow.
We have similar stories, Dr. McAlister.
Yes, indeed. That's right. I think you have some connections in Madera.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Well, I'm from LA.
All right.
I came to Fresno State. And when I came here, I was like shell shocked for a little while, but I got over it. Well, I initially came to Fresno State. It was on a track and field scholarship, and I was fortunate enough to get that to pay for school, and I had to choose a major. And I actually always wanted to be a physical therapist or a chiropractor. And during my college experience, I discerned that I wasn't focused enough or mature enough to and with the balancing of my athletics and academics to really get the grades I needed to get to qualify for grad school. So I looked at other options. I met with my counselor. Actually, I had an African-American counselor, Keith Carradine. Played basketball at Cal State LA and came here as a counselor, primarily to serve African-American athletes. And he said, why don't you try psychology? I said, okay. And that began my journey. I changed over to psychology. I was able to complete that degree. My dad, who Pastor McAlister knows, and I believe First Lady is familiar with, Bishop Samuel Morgan, Church of God in Christ, he was disappointed, and he was pretty much upset that I was changing my major from a very potentially lucrative field to change to psychology. And he said he prayed and asked God, if that's the right thing. And God told him, his words, I know what I'm doing with Samuel. And I went on to case management work, social work, primarily caseload of people with disabilities, including disabilities such as mental health issues, as well as cognitive delays and physical handicaps, and over at Central Valley Regional Center. And during that time, also becoming a licensed minister, and pursuing, initially I was youth minister, and then pursuing just ministry in general to serve people. So that prompted me to pursue a degree in counseling psychology. And it was significant and important to me to choose a degree that would help me help other people. Because my mission statement and my goals in life are not for me to be rich or famous. And it's important that I help people, and nobody has to know if I help them. I just need to be able to help them. And so the best way to equip myself to help people, I felt, because a lot of the trauma and experiences that everyone on this panel has had is in your family. I mean, there's abuse, there's racism, there's microaggressions, macroaggressions, so many issues that we as African Americans and all people have to face on a daily basis. And I felt like having the balance of God and psychology would equip me to help people the best. And so even pursuing my doctorate, I was initially going for a biblical studies degree, I have a secular degree, and I wanted to strengthen my biblical knowledge and understanding. And it was recommended to me based on my transcripts to pursue the doctorate in Christian counseling, which I think was a perfect marriage of my skill set and would allow me to appropriately and effectively serve people in our community. And, so often pastors don't have the training and leaders don't have the training that First Lady Kreiner has or Pastor McAlister, but they do their best. And they get by on what the word says, which we should, because for me, the Bible is the final court of arbitration. When all else fails, well, what did God say? I know you mad and you want to do this, but what did God say? I want to kill myself. I hear you. I know. And we can deal with it from the psychological aspects and use the orientations and modalities that we've been trained in to help detour them. But on top of that, what did God say? And we want to remind people that are believers. Now, everybody's not a believer. And you can't always use that in every session, in every instance. And you want to meet people where they are, right? Yeah. Right. You know, I definitely feel like having training in both areas would have effectively equipped me to serve people in our community. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that was great. And it's a perfect segue. And before I segue into my next question, I do want to remind our viewers, which we have a great crowd watching us live on YouTube and Facebook, that use the chat. If you have a question for the panelists, one in particular, or the entire panel, please share in the chat, and we'll try to do our best to get to it later in the discussion. So back to that segue about blending, your studies, your biblical studies, your faith and ministry with mental wellness and that work. So we know that, like, historically for years, mental wellness and faith, they weren't really melded together in a way, right? So do you see that changing? Like, do you see a evolution, if you will, where those are being blended together, and how is that best executed?
That's an interesting question, Dennis. I think for me the answer would be yes to that. I think that what has happened in the church, in the African American church, is that we have been sort of going through stages like from a caterpillar to a butterfly. You look back at our history and traditionally, and even today, we're still seen as a place that provides spiritual guidance, moral guidance, a place that provides a fellowship. But we've sort of evolved from that, which is a good thing, to begin to address a whole another array of issues. I mean, historically, civil rights has always been at the core and the heart of what we've done. We're now engaged in that. And of course, as you experience at a different level, the whole Black Lives Matter movement and all of that stuff and what that's about, and how people who are of Christian background find themselves in the midst of that, and also in the leadership of much of those activities that are taking place at that level. But we also, and Jessica alluded to that, that many of our churches are moving more towards looking at how do we help people who have been traumatized, who've been wounded, who have been hurt in other areas, whether, as Dr. Morgan says, whether it's via mental health counseling, whether it's via a food ministry, whether it's via job training, whether it's via grief counseling. And that's something that our church has recently decided to sort of partner with some other churches, just because of the whole thing with COVID and how people have been traumatized by that. And basically seeing folk who are dealing with post-traumatic stress symptoms. And so our churches have sort of moved, and yet even our messages, our sermons attempt to deal with where we are today. I did a thing last Sunday on anxiety, worry-free living, and tried to give folks some tools as to how to be able to navigate during these difficult days in which we live. So anyway, I've said enough. Those are just some of my thoughts on that.
Well, that was greatly put, Pastor McAlister.
Absolutely, Pastor. Absolutely.
I was just going to piggyback off of what you said. In the Black community, we are taught that we just deal with it, or we just pray it away, or that it's weakness if we say that we need help. And so those are all myths. We know that, right? I mean, if we're talking about the church, Jesus was our example, right? So how many times did he meet people where they were, right? Emotionally, sometimes even physically, giving them their physical needs first before he even addressed their emotional needs. So we have to be able to give people faith, but also know, just like Sam had said a couple moments ago, is that yes, you feel suicidal. We can deal with that. But what does the Bible say? What did Jesus come to do? Like, he's felt all of these feelings that you are feeling. You're not in this alone. And I think sometimes also we miss, sometimes in the Black community, the power of community, because we need each other to survive. And so we feel like we have to deal with it alone. We have to do it by ourselves. And that's not how we were created by God. And that's definitely not how and that's one of the things as a therapist, I'm always assessing for, is like, who are your supports? How do we get you supported? How do we get you connected? Because we definitely cannot do this by ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jessica, you remind me of the fact when you talked about how we were created and so forth, Dennis and Dr. Morgan, it always comes clear to me that we're three parts. That we're body, we're spirit and soul, and we have a mind, and all of those parts, I call it a holistic approach. All of those parts have to be sort of ministered to or dealt with.
Yes,
they're all important.
Yes.
Well, Pastor McAlister took the words right out of my mouth, because that's our philosophy here at Westside Church of God, and with our counseling center, we want to make the church, from my perspective, and I'm sure you agree, should be a place of refuge. No matter what your issue is, no matter what your challenge is, you should be able to come to the church unjudgmentally. It should be a safe place. We have to be able to integrate mental health and a psychological perspective and holistic approach to serving people in our community and our membership, because we're the first place that they reach out to. Something happens, who do most people call? The pastor, the deacon, the first lady. Sure. And we have to be equipped and able to support them and not say, oh, well, baby, let me just pray for you. If you have a broken bone, I do believe in the power of prayer and that God can heal, but I'm gonna get a doctor to help the healing process, because it doesn't make sense to have that resource made available to us by God, I believe, and not utilize it. It would be remiss for us to be equipped to serve the people with a holistic approach, meaning we have food service, we have food giveaways, we help with housing disparities and other issues, and we still want you to accept Christ. But our mission and our initial, as Jessica said, is to serve and meet your immediate need first. It's very vital and very significant. The other thing that I want to interject, if I may, is it's important that the church, and a part of our mission with the counseling center, is to erase the stigma associated with mental health. So people often come with an issue or a problem. They don't connect it to mental health, but we can assess if it's derived from a mental health condition that's undiagnosed and therefore unaddressed. And we want to be able to be equipped to serve them. So we have resources available in our church and in the community that we can refer people to. Let me add one more thing. It's important that we address or erase the stigma by how we preach from the pulpit. Meaning we have to no longer say words like, well, God's not schizophrenic, because then that's making it seem like the schizophrenic who's dealing with it, who doesn't want to take their medication, that, it's a negative thing. And, so we try to change stuff like that, or we don't use the word crazy and anything that's negative or, towards someone who may be having those very issues. We want to be accepting of people who have mental health conditions. And it's not that they don't have faith. It's not that they don't believe God in them, but sometimes it's just a chemical imbalance in a person that could be hereditary, that could contribute to a mood disorder that we do need to pray. We do need to offer support, as Jessica said, but we also can serve them best from a mental health approach.
I love all of the responses.
I agree
you all
that.
gave. I think, you know, the next thing I wanted to ask about it, you guys have already addressed, like the role, what is the role and the responsibility of the church in healing the trauma in the community? Like, and what I've heard is, you know, we have to have, the church has to lead the way. Like it has to be from the pulpit down, and it's not just in the form of therapy, but, you know, it's outreach through food ministries and grief counseling. I've heard job training even, you know, like all of these things can contribute to the mental wellness of the community and to individuals. So yeah, that's definitely something I wanted to touch on, because, you know, hundreds of years of trauma is not solved overnight, and it's not just one solution. So I'm glad to hear, you know, all of these different arms of outreach and support.
Well, you know, Dennis, one of the things is that plays out for me that I think about a lot is who are we? Who are we as Christians? Who are we as believers in the Christian church? And it just sort of comes to my mind that we're followers of Christ. And when I look at the life of Christ, he was about touching people. He was about dealing with those who were impoverished, and it was about dealing with those who were sick, and those who had mental issues going on in their life, and those who were dealing with divides because of racial and ethnic lines that were drawn. And I think that as we follow him, I see the church, and I'd be interested in Jessica and Dr. Morgan's perspective on this, but I see the church that we become sort of the hands and feet, if you will, of Christ. And we become healing agents also to touch people in a variety of ways in our community.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Dr. McAlister. Yes. We are the hands and feet of God, right? We are his workmanship, right? And so I think too, just piggyback off what he said is, and Dennis, you had asked, like, what can the church do? I think one of the main things that is probably the most important part is not be judgmental when it comes to mental health. When we talk about the woman at the well, right? Jesus met her where she was. Well, first of all, he was doing therapy right there. Oh yeah. Right at the well, right? And with that woman, right? She's telling him his story. He's just asking the right questions, right? And so that's kind of what we as therapists do. I mean, it's mostly this, we are trained not to be judgmental. And I think that that's part of the training that needs to come with the church, is not to be judgmental, but also not to think of people as their diagnosis. Because I think a lot of times, but you know how sometimes in the Bible, the Pharisees or the Sadducees, they would say, oh, you know, that person with the issue, right? And so that's how they were described. And I think it's really important that we don't take that as that is who that person is their diagnosis, that there are still person and that they are seen by God just as we are. And so I think those are like, and the last thing I would say is just being empathetic, being able to step into a person's shoes is really important. And those are all the things that Jesus did for the woman at the well, when he did it for the man at the tomb of Gadareans, when he did it for Elijah, Jonah, like all those people who had mental health issues and were suicidal or wanted to die or wanted to not live anymore. So I think it's really important that those three things be factors when we are training our leaders when it comes to mental health.
Jessica, I'm glad you brought us some examples of mental health issues in the Bible, because we know about Moses, and I'm sure Jonah had to be depressed to stay in the belly of a fish for 3 days, because I'd have been like, I'm done. Okay, I give up. But obviously,
Right.
I was like, man,
Right.
I realized that before. And then Elijah, we know in 1 Kings
Yes.
chapter 18, oh, he was showing up. But Bathsheba said, I'm coming to kill you. And if I don't kill you before the day is
He was
over,
like, kill me right now.
So he was depressed. So it brings some normalization
Yes.
to people and acceptance that this is not, you're not weird, you're not bad, you're not evil. You know, and then a lot of people have experienced significant trauma who have been victims. They feel like they're bad, they're dirty. It was my fault. I should not have put myself there, or I should not have allowed that, when truthfully it was done to them and out of their control. And so we have to have a high level of sensitivity and making sure that we are compassionate, just like Christ was, to all of us. And when these people come in and they have needs and they have issues, the first thing I know I need to assure people of is when they have the courage to speak to me, is that this is between us.
Yes.
Okay.
Ethically, clinically, and biblically, I can't share it. Not with the pastor, our senior pastor, not with your mama, your cousin who I know. I'm not saying nothing to nobody. It's between us. And I think that needs to be reiterated because there's so much gossip, distrust, and they're worried about the stigma and what other people think. So I think it's very important, and we as a church, to make sure that people understand that it's confidential. Another thing I wanted to mention is we try very hard to minimize the cost of getting clinical service, because unfortunately people use that as an excuse. They'll buy $250 shoes, $3,000 TVs. They'll pay $1,500 for a 49er, Cowboys, Raiders, football ticket. But when it comes to therapy, they don't want to pay nothing. So what we've done, amen, I know, amen, thank you. I hear those amen. What we've done at Westside for a significant number of years, we had a psychologist on retainer. I would do the assessment, determine if it's worthy of them. If I can handle it on my level, I would. But if they need long-term counseling, then we will refer them over. So we paid this psychologist, a retainer or a certain amount a month to see our laity or our members, and that worked out great. They were off-site, so it also gave a higher level of or additional level of confidentiality as well. So making this an important part, erasing the stigma, and the church understanding that we're dealing with, especially in the Black community, a high level of trauma and issues and problems. And it's not that it doesn't exist outside the Black community, but unfortunately, statistically, we are the least likely to take advantage of it. And I'm very happy, always looked up to Pastor McAlister for being a licensed LCSW, and my own First Lady, Sister Kreiner, just really being in this field, because there's, I think, only 4% of clinicians are African-American. And then in the Fresno area, males, I mean, I can count all of them on one hand, and I don't think I can fill up the hand for males. And most of the LMFTs are Caucasian females, statistically. And so we want to have opportunities and for clinicians that look like us and resemble our population, so it can increase the comfort level. But don't let it be a barrier if you can't find one that's Black. Go get help.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I love that.
So that's sometimes what we allude to or think about in terms of cross-cultural counseling. Sometimes we're dealing with people who are ethnically different than who we are. And so, as you pointed out, Dr. Morgan, it's important that people get that help. It's great, if there is someone of your ethnic persuasion available, because sometimes we have a little bit deeper understanding on some issues of things that people are going through. But if that is not available, many other folks from ethnic different backgrounds can be very helpful to us in moving forward with our lives.
Can I piggyback off of that too?
Please.
Please. So So we're trained therapists are also trained too to get their own therapy. So, so we are not just doing it. We are actually working on our own stuff as well. They tell us and teach us that this is one of the most important parts of becoming a therapist is getting your own therapy. I go to therapy. I love Miss Whitney, and she is not Black.
Okay. Okay.
So, but I say that to normalize that, yes, I'm all for having people like me in the field. And sometimes you trust their judgment more than you trust the counterpart. But I will also say, like Pastor McAlister has said, that if you can't find that, don't let that be your excuse to not seek out services, because there are some really good therapists that can relate, and maybe not relate to you the way you think you need to be related to, because that's another thing too that we have to take into an account.
Yeah, and I would just take a moment to do a little sales job. If there are any college students who are looking on this program today, Dennis, it's my hope and desire that they would take advantage of the counseling services that we provide there at the health center. And we have an array of disciplines and different ethnic groups to provide those services, and all of those therapists are great.
And your insurances too. Sorry, Dennis.
No, please.
Your insurances, if you are Medi-Cal, I know some people, there's a lot of negativity or negative connotations related to Medi-Cal. But the thing is that as clients, you have the ability to say yes or no. You have control over that. And so that is one of the things that I try and stress to a lot of people, is that if it doesn't work out, it's okay. On to the next until you find somebody who works for you. On to the next.
I like that. That's true. Sure. Well, what you're talking about is that it's important in the therapeutic process to have the right fit.
Yes.
And it's not, sometimes it's sort of like going to the doctor. Sometimes this doctor has sort of, it's the right fit. And then sometimes it's not quite the right fit. They irritate you, they upset you. The bedside manner is terrible. You say, I need to find somebody else,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, you guys have done a great job kind of describing what someone providing mental health support should, the characters they should have, not being judgmental, not pathologizing, not, making sure the compassion and empathy are part of the delivery, right? So I wanted to discuss, and we do, and before I move on, I do want to let you know that we're getting great feedback in the comments here on both Facebook and YouTube. There is a question from one of our counterparts at Tulare County that I will get to in just a moment. But one thing we hear a lot about is trusted messengers. How important is a trusted messenger when it comes to providing mental health support? And as it pertains to the Black church, like, is that something that the church can leverage? Like, hey, this is where you come for support in other areas. And this is why we can communicate to you that this is important and how you can pursue mental wellness.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Morgan talked about, and Jessica alluded to that too, the importance of not judging and confidentiality and so forth. And I'm sort of, Dennis, I'm sort of at a place at our church where I've started to push that because people have been traumatized and there's so much stuff going on in their lives, I can't deal with all that stuff. So we're at a place of expanding in several areas. And then I'm looking at a specific area of just social services in general. How do we deal with people? Some of the stuff that Jessica and are already doing at their place, how do we deal with people with housing disparities? How do we deal with people who are struggling, paying their rent? What resources and things are available? How do we become a referral resource in many cases and so forth? Just that whole arena of social services, and I'm finding out is critical in our community. And underneath that is this whole idea is that whoever comes, we want them to be able to trust us. So this idea of confidentiality and privacy is critically important. Matter of fact, that, you know, if in the therapeutic realm, if you can't trust your therapist, if there's something that if nothing happens at first or second session that clicks between you, between that client and the therapist, that allows the client to feel they can trust you, chances are it's over with already. Yeah, so trust becomes paramount in what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. I'm the designee at our church, Westside Church of God, for services. If they go to pastor first, our senior pastor, Pastor Binion, then based on the need, he'll refer him to me, and that's for food disparities, housing disparities. Maybe if you have a crisis, PG&E is about to get turned off because of loss of job, especially with the pandemic. Many people did lose their jobs, and they were having issues paying, you know, bills that they historically have paid on time, but ran into an issue. And so we try to be equipped to be able to meet those needs and determine, you know, what the financial need is and how we can support them and make sure that they can keep the lights on. They have small children, you know, they're elderly, you know, whatever the issue is. And we really, as I said before, have a holistic approach to that. We're doing some of the things that Pastor McAlister and Jessica have described. You know, we have to look past just come to church on Sunday. We need to support the members, and we do regular phone calls, check-ins, just to see how you're doing. If we don't see you, if my pastor don't see you for a couple Sundays, he's gonna call you or tell me to call just to see how you're doing, because we really do care. It's not about, I think everyone that's in pastoral ministry or in some type of ministry does it from a place of wanting to sow a seed, wanting to be a blessing. They feel called to it. It's not serve me, but how can I serve you? And that's definitely the approach and the mentality that I think we all look at in our West Fresno churches and churches throughout our communities, and which we're trusted because we've shown that we care. They trust us because we've shown that we care and that we can we can help meet their needs, and we can keep it confidential, as stated before as well.
Yeah, Dennis, you had asked about like how trusted, like how can we make sure that this is a trusted space? And so I think for the Black church, for a long time, the pastor has been everything to the Black church. And you take everything to the pastor. And so my hope is that we will continue to move away from that, and that pastors will be able to designate trustworthy congregants that can carry these messages, like Pastor McAlister and Sam and myself, that we are trusted, that they will trust us, and they will actually direct those people who need the assistance to us, because we want to break that stigma that the pastor has to be everything to the Black church. When Jesus had disciples. He knew that the work had to be done. It's too much for one person to do all by themselves. And so I think that it starts from the head down, but also believe that those trusted officials also seek out other people within their congregations that have maybe a mental health background. One of the things that I'm learning in my own church is that there are so many people, I didn't know that already working in this field. And so they know about confidentiality. They know about handling things with care. They know about resources within the community. So yeah, that's all I was going to say about that.
You know, one other resource that we've developed that comes to mind is, I call it 65 and Alive. During the pandemic, even before the pandemic, it became apparent that a lot of our congregants are 65 years and older, and they don't have a place sometimes. It was like, okay, it didn't dawn on me till recently, a couple of years ago. how they can feel pushed away, unused, unvaluable, and not have any significant contribution. We have ministries for youth. We have ministries for singles. We have ministries for the married. We have a ministry for everybody.
Good point.
But the seniors. So
Sure.
I developed what I call 65 and Alive, and it's a committee of members who are willing to serve, who devise and develop activities for seniors, their own Bible studies, events, luncheons, and if they need something like a medical, like maybe medication, they can't leave the house. They've had a surgery and they need food and other things. And that ministry keeps up with them and follows them and lets us know, me and maybe the diaconate, the deacons and deaconess, to serve them and make sure that their needs are met. So this is back to that trusted, holistic approach and making sure that we're definitely meeting the needs of all our members and that no one feels like they're not valuable.
Yeah. Dr. Morgan, I like that. That's the first time I've heard of that, 65 and Alive. That's great, man. That's good stuff. You're giving me some ideas here. I'm just listening to you all today. One of the things, Dennis, that happened, and I think the 65 and Alive is sort of plugging in part of the gap of that. But Dennis, one of the things that happened that we saw with the pandemic in the Black church is that there has been a real disconnect. There's been an issue of isolation. And we've seen that on campus with college students who've been disconnected from their instructors and from their peers and the college atmosphere and so forth. But within the church, because we were on lockdown and for a while, Jessica, nobody was showing up but me and a couple of media guys. And that was it, Everybody else was seeing me on Sunday mornings eating bacon and eggs and sausage and biscuits, dipping them in strawberry jam, So thank God things are changing a little bit. But my point is this isolation, this pandemic has had a tremendous effect and on the mental health and particularly that aged population, Dr. Morgan, that you speak about. And so being able to connect in ways that you describe, I think are critically important, whether we're in a pandemic or not in a pandemic. I think that's really important for that age group. So thanks for sharing that, sir.
Absolutely. And the isolation was a big part of it. As Pastor mentioned, because they probably felt more isolated than I think any other age group. And so we wanted to address that and make sure that they had support and going to continue to do that.
Good.
I love hearing about all the different services and ministries each of your congregations engages in. One of the questions that came from Facebook, one of our counterparts at Tulare County, is what are some of the capabilities to bridge or opportunities maybe to bridge county behavioral health and the outreach that's going on in the faith communities and at your churches? Is it something that you're currently engaging in or exploring, or what opportunities do you think are there?
Well, yes. Ironically, I met with Susan Holt last 2 weeks ago, maybe. Pastor Binion and I, Minister Mickey McAlister, who's a licensed MFT, in connection with our Westside Counseling Center and becoming a group provider, and then building that relationship so that we can stay connected to them and we can be a resource for them in the community. Outreach opportunities can be connected with us, and we can just really develop a robust program that can serve our community. My pastor has always said, and I've always supported it, is we have this big, 28,000 square foot church. It's not there to look pretty. It's there to be used.
That's
so
good.
We want to make our church a central location. Now we got a few other great churches around, but we want to do our part within our niche.
Thank you, Dr. Mark.
Yes. Oh,
that clarification.
Oh, you got a nice church you built it, and the rest, who don't know the rest. And so we just want to do our part over on our side of town. But it's vitally important that we establish outreach opportunities. We've had events for COVID testing, COVID vaccinations. We have doctors in our congregation, so they've done medical examinations and presentations on women's health, on men's health, the importance of, healthcare, because Black men especially won't go to the doctor and won't get a prostate exam and rather die of prostate cancer than to get an exam. So we had to get on that kick for a while and just everything that's associated with health and wellness. We're praying for you to get well, but you won't stop eating bacon. I mean, it's just like we try to have as much outreach and I like bacon too, but one piece.
Well, Morgan, it's hard for folk to give up ribs, brother. It's hard.
I had some.
Dennis, in keeping with the spirit of what Dr. Margaret is talking about, and Jessica, First Lady Jessica, I think all of our churches, I'm sure there are many other churches here in Fresno who are not, part of this presentation today, who are sort of thinking and moving in the same direction. And I know that at Saints Community Wellness Ministries is a major piece of the page that we're on, because I've said, and it's in the vision statement, that we're concerned about the physical, social, emotional, and spiritual wealth of every person.
Yes.
So our wellness ministry thing, whether it's grief counseling or whether we're looking at nutrition issues or whether we have CPR and we have people who are on board who are providing those kinds of services, to that other link of social services and trying to address those needs. And that's sort of where we see ourselves going at this point. But I think there are many other churches who are sort of in the Black community. And I say Black community because now there was a time that when we said Black community, all of our churches were pretty much in West Fresno. We had our start in West Fresno, the West Fresno Christian Academy back in the day.
Yep.
We're not in that location now. And there's a number of other African-American churches that are outside, quote, West Fresno. And yet their congregations are serving African-Americans and serving other ethnic groups. And of course, all of our churches, we welcome diversity. And we welcome people who don't look like us. And I think that's a good thing. But my point is, I think as a whole, the Black church is trying to move in that arena that you're sort of talking about, Dennis, and that we've been discussing here today.
Yeah, and I would say if this is a great start just right here, bridging the Black church and the Department of Health. Like, when did that happen? I was super pumped when Dennis reached out to me and said, hey, we're partnering with about the Black church. So I think more conversations like this, and also bringing in the people who can be the resources and provide the resources. Like I said before, this work is too big for one person to do all by themselves. We need each other to make this work.
Yeah. And Dennis, I don't want to let this go. So let me just say this right now as we continue our dialogue today. I want to thank you personally because I got involved because of you and others and your Department of Behavioral Services because of their link to Fresno State campus. And it was my boss, my supervisor, who sort of brought it to my attention and say, hey, this is something would you be interested in doing? So that was really the link of how I got here. So I'm glad that the health department, Department of Behavioral Health, has that link with Fresno State. That's wonderful, sir.
Absolutely. I mean, we touched on community earlier, right? And so, I mean, the Black church is a community. The Department of Behavioral Health wants to build community with the Black church, with other institutions like the university and so on, so that we can normalize and advance this discussion so that it's not, that stigma is not there and it's not something we're constantly having to convince folks. But now we just offer those services that are enriching to their lives, and it's accepted. It becomes more accepted. And I love what I heard about, mental wellness being a part of a church's vision statement, and having individuals who are equipped to provide those services as a part of the congregation, like that is how we normalize and prioritize Black mental wellness, just that overall emphasis, and of course that building of community. So I wanted to ask, the Black experience is unique. We are unique, but we're not a monolith, of course. We always want to acknowledge that. What has worked, what hasn't worked in terms of mental health and wellness practices? And are there any creative approaches to providing services that we haven't touched on here today that may work for the Black community, but maybe not others, or work specifically for the Black community? Forgive me if I stumbled over that, but I think I conveyed it okay.
Yeah. I think one of the areas where we continue to work on, and where we struggle, is probably helping our people feel comfortable with the idea of accessing mental health services, whether it's via the church or whether it's via other health facilities or private practitioners, whatever. So there's work that we need to continue to do in that area. Our folks, because of history, has had a distrust in mental health, and that goes all the way back to slavery. When we were, the slaves were diagnosed with having drapetomania, and that was a diagnosis they was labeled with, and that had to do with the fact that they were busy running away. Well, we all understand why they were trying to run away, why they were trying to get away from the situation, but they were labeled. And I think, ever since that time, and historically, with the way the industry, mental health industry, has related to us, it's been hard for us to fully buy in. But we're making progress, and I think in our churches, I think we have to continue to push that with events like this, with workshops, or sermons, or inviting guest speakers to come in, or exposing our kids to educators who are working in these fields. I think all of that is probably important.
I think I can speak to it a little bit. One of the creative things that we've done out of necessity is meet people via Zoom. With Zoom, Teams, it just wasn't widely used or even comfortable. And then there was an issue of confidentiality, with that. And once we've been able to assure the confidentiality of a Zoom session, it gives us an opportunity to reach multiple people in a shorter period of time. I've met with people in state and out of state, in town and out of town, because of Zoom availability. And then I didn't have to be in town to talk to them. They didn't have to be in town to meet with me. And so even though for a clinician, it's difficult, and I'm not a licensed clinician, so I don't want to give anybody the impression that I am, but I do pastoral counseling. We like to read body language and mannerisms and tendencies, and sometimes it's difficult to do that as effectively, but it's still another means, a creative means for us to serve and to touch the lives of other people. The other thing that we've noticed, and a part of our vision at Westside Church of God and the Westside counseling system, is to have low cost or cost-free or low cost services. And so we're hoping with the partnership with Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health, helping us be able to receive funding through them, and then we can definitely be able to have low cost or no cost for the people that we're serving. One of the barriers, the greatest barriers that I've run into is with mental health services, is the fear of medication. And I understand I don't want to take nothing. But when you're having a major depression episode, and when you're manic, or you're psychotic, or schizophrenic, or schizoaffective, it's important to make sure that the medication will help in conjunction with talk therapy. So the medication and talk therapy. See, well, I don't want the side effects. It's going to mess me up. Well, people self-medicate with stuff that's killing them every day. They overdrink, they overeat, they use drugs, and all kind of stuff to self-medicate. And they're more worried about that than they are about the prescribed medication, which is clinically based and medically proven to give them the benefits that they need. And then with medication, if you don't feel right and it makes you feel really bad and the side effects are impacting you, then you can go back to your doctor and get a new prescription. And then the other thing is when people do take medication, they start feeling better, they stop taking the medication.
Right.
So that's one of the barriers that I've come into. I'm not able to prescribe medication, but we do refer them to their doctors and ask that they do that, because sometimes the cases are so severe, especially with the diagnosis that I mentioned, that you can't take a risk, do the medication and the talk therapy and pray. And pray.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback off of the medication piece as well, Dr. Morgan, because that is one thing that I often hear is that I don't want to have to take medication. I don't want to have to be addicted to it. That's one of the things I hear a lot of. And so as clinicians, we are trained to legally, professionally, morally to exhaust all the resources. Like we're not just, that's not the one thing that we always go to, but it is a resource. And I have tons of clients who are functioning very well on medication. And so taking away that stigma is very important. I think one thing that also that might be a barrier is that, yes, I know that each church has their own community or way of doing things, but I would love it if Westside and then would mentor St. Rest, and that Pastor McAlister would come in and help develop a mental wellness program, or whatever the case may be, that there won't be that divide amongst the churches where you're doing mental health and you're doing mental health over here. No, we're all doing mental health, and that we all need to be able to work together. So I think that I feel like that is a barrier amongst the churches, is that, we need to communicate with each other about what this idea of working with our people looks like.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, Jessica, and I really agree with that. I think that is an area where we can continue to definitely work on and improve. Some of that is sort of happening behind the scenes at the pastoral level, because frequently I refer members out to other practitioners from other churches who have private practices and so forth, because not everybody from the local church will want to be seen at the local church, and so that's just one of those issues that we have to deal with in reality. And then there are times that I end up getting referrals from all of the churches who are on this afternoon, that I've received referrals from them, and end up so I think we're doing some of that, but I think there are some ways that we can certainly partner and look at how we can provide greater services to the community at large. And I'm certainly open to that kind of discussion and meeting, or our folks, our professionals who work in that area, to see how we can do that for the sake of our community. Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Sounds like we're on to something here.
Yes, sir.
Have you all noticed, especially considering the times we're in, with systemic racism at the forefront, with the raging pandemic, like, are church members embracing mental health support more than they had previously? Obviously, there's a lot more services and support mechanisms available now. Have we seen an uptick and in that seeking of support?
I would definitely say yes. I believe people are reaching out more. I would say there has been an increase to some extent, but it was still an influx before. The issue is different now. It's more centralized. Most of it has to do with depression, suicide. That has been probably the most common. Thoughts of hurting themselves, thoughts of, what, I don't want to go on, I don't want to be here anymore. Hopelessness and despair has been the driving force for people reaching out, I think, more so in recent months or over the last 18 months than in the past. And then there's been more domestic issues. More domestic violence, more domestic issues. I also serve as a volunteer chaplain for the Fresno Police Department. And while I'm on duty, I can see on the monitor screen all the calls that the police are getting all over the city. And most of them are for DV, domestic violence.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
A lot. I mean, it's then you see gunshots. You see, violence has increased. So there's violence in relationships. There's issues because people have been quarantined and isolated with other people, and they didn't really have an outlet, and they kind of took it out on each other. And then there's people who are just suicidal from either isolation, loneliness, or just, depression from the situation, the climate that we live in. And then watching on TV the murder of George Floyd and others, and just so much going on in the community. Administration has changed now, but previously, as a Black person, you had a lot of concerns. So yes, I've seen an uptick.
Sure. I think people are much more sensitive now to those issues that you described, Dr. Morgan. It's, unfortunately, Dennis, racism is alive and well out there. And it's something that our parishioners, our members, and our community has to continue to deal with. And so I think at the level of what happens within the institution of the church, I think it's an issue that we have to look at, to address, preach about, to be realistic about what's there, to have discussions, allow people to have support groups, discussions about that. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? How do Black parents, mothers and dads have that talk with their sons and daughters, particularly with their boys, about how to carry themselves when they're away from home and they encounter law enforcement and so forth. So there's a lot, and unfortunately, with all that has happened, and Dr. Morgan alluded to that, and then there, you can go down the list. You can name another 8 or 10, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and you can go on, and all of that stuff sort of re-traumatizes, if you will. It brings back to light. It brings back those images every time you see George Floyd there. They show that, and George Floyd's been gone for a while now. But the fact that this stuff is still being dealt with, it sort of re-traumatizes again, and we find ourselves. And so even in our preaching, we're trying to do messages of hope to our people and encouragement, in spite of what it looks like. You can make it, we're gonna make it, that kind of thing.
Amen.
Yeah, but it's there.
Yeah, definitely there. I appreciate my pastor being very vocal about the racial justice issues that are happening across our country, even across our city. And so it's been very, there's been a whole series this month just about racial justice issues and how they connect to Jesus's mission here on earth. So that it's a lot of times there's a lot of talk about, no, we don't talk about this kind of stuff in the church. Jesus, there was no racism. And that conversation is traumatic for the Black person. But all that to say is I think that it is that the sermons and the messages that we are putting out are starting to heighten this awareness of mental health. And I think what we're all talking about here is a post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? That is happening on the daily lives of Black people and the Black church. And so I just appreciate conversations like this to be able to be open and honest about what is happening in our community.
Jessica, the other thing is that Jesus always spoke truth to power.
Yes.
And we find ourselves caught in that situation now at different times. And I certainly appreciate your pastor, because he and Dr. Binion and Lewis and many others in our community been out there on the front lines of sort of dealing with stuff.
Yes. I appreciate him too.
Yes, absolutely.
And he appreciates you because he definitely commented on the YouTube video.
I appreciate
Don't tell me
too.
what he said.
DJ, I appreciate you too, guys.
He's definitely tuned in. Definitely tuned in. Well, I wanted to take this opportunity. If there are any final remarks or topics anyone wanted to speak to, our audience consists of not only clinicians, but mental health staff across across counties, actually. Like I said, we had Tulare County in the house. And also, the lay person who's not involved in this work, or maybe, wanting to seek services themselves, or just curious. If there's any last comments or remarks you wanted to have, I want to leave the stage open for that. And we've pushed past some time, so we can wrap it up, and we'll certainly look forward to another discussion. So I wanted to open the floor up.
Well, I just want to thank you for allowing us this opportunity and for having this forum, Dennis. I think this is great. This is great stuff. I'm glad that this could take place during Black History Month, but it's my hope and desire that even when it's not Black History Month, this kind of stuff will continue to happen. And I appreciate the Department of Behavioral Health willing to sponsor this kind of forum. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, and it's been an honor to have you as a part of the discussion, Pastor McAlister. Well,
I'll go.
yeah. I mean, it's not. Yeah, it's optional. It's optional.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just piggyback after what Dr. McAlister said. I'm just so grateful to be able to have these conversations, be able to talk about mental health, normalize it, and just be able to provide the knowledge that I know. And I know, like I said before, this work is too big for one person to do. So I am so glad to be able to partner with the Department of Health, who actually sees that this is important work as well. So I'm just grateful for being here. Thank you, Dr. McAlister and Dr. Morgan, for just being here too.
Thank you.
Well, God said it's not good that man should be alone. And of course, he was pertaining it specifically when he created Eve. But I still think that principle applies. And none of us should feel isolated. And we have to be a beacon of hope and a light to our membership, as well as to our community, of where they can find help. And we have to be, as I think Pastor McAlister said, the hands of Jesus. We have to meet them at the well, wherever they're at. Like Jessica said, if they're at the well, we'll go to the well, wherever they are. And I think it's important that people know that they have support, and that they have help, and that they have refuge, and that just like for Jesus, there's nothing you can do that's too bad. You can't go too far or do nothing too wrong. He will still accept you back. And we, as followers of Christ, who are also clinically trained, will also provide you the services and the love and the acceptance that you need in order to get back on track with your life. Because we all get off track, and we all need. There was true. During the pandemic, I had to stop watching the news. I was addicted to the news, and it was depressing me and tearing me up. And so I had to go off of it and make sure and make sure I increased my time of fellowship and study in the Word, so that I can fight against all the negativity that was going on with me. And like Jessica said, in my role, I also get counseling check-ins once a month, just to make sure all my stuff is good, so that I can be as healthy as possible to serve other people. So for Fresno County Behavioral Health and anyone else that's watching, thank you for joining us today. First Lady Kreiner, outstanding. very proud of you. She's also my daughter's godmother.
All right.
Hi, Mommy, First Lady.
All right.
And Pastor McAlister, I actually sat under him during my internship for group counseling, and he has helped me tremendously over several years. And I look up to him immensely. So appreciate this opportunity. Dennis and Brian, thank you for keeping us technically ready. And Brian took the picture of me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he made me look good for a change. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you all. First Lady Kreiner, Dr. Morgan, Pastor McAlister. This was an amazing discussion. Like I said, the feedback in the comments, you can go back on Facebook and YouTube and see you're getting a lot of love from, I think, folks who know, and folks maybe you don't know. They're very appreciative of us broaching this topic in this forum. So thank you so much. We look forward to the continued work that you're doing in the community. And of course, there will be partnerships that we also look forward to between the department and the local Black church community. So I'll take this opportunity really quick for our viewers to remind you that throughout the month, we hosted several other panel discussions and conversations, including one on institutional, legislative, and individual responsibility in addressing the assaults on the Black community with Dr. Karen Crozier, and one just last week about the necessity of Black service providers. So if you hadn't had an opportunity to check those out, please visit our YouTube and Facebook pages. And you can also connect with us on Instagram. So we're trying to do things here real current and progressive here at the department. But again, thank you all to all of our panelists and to all of our viewers out there. We really appreciate you. And until next time, we look forward to another opportunity to converse and advance this conversation. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Have
you.
a good afternoon, folks.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.